Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. And the 2035 to 2036 offseason is finally ready to get underway. I've made some decisions. Appreciate all of you who have opined on my request for help with the option year decision that we have on James Wood. And I have gone back and forth on this over the past few days and the past couple of episodes. Appreciate all of the thoughts that many of you have shared with me on Wood as a player and on whether or not we should exercise that $7 million option for next season. A lot of players whose input I value highly. Jackhammer Possessor, Patrick DeBonis, Three Quarters Badger, Stanley Rosella, fake name, have all opined on this question. And you've all pretty much opined in the same direction, that Wood is overrated, overpaid, and underperforming, and I should move on from him. And you have convinced me to not exercise the option on Mr. Wood. I do think, and I mentioned this in the comments to some of you over the last episode or two, that if Wood is to hit this upcoming free agent market, with his skill set, I feel like he's going to be looking for more than $7 million a year. And some of you have suggested to me that after declining the option, we could circle back with him and we might be able to pick him up for $3, $4, $5 million a year. It'll be interesting to see. Looking at this set of players, I think Wood probably slots in when you look at his ratings offensively and defensively and the performance of what he's done over the course of his major league career. I think he starts slotting in with this crew around here where he could be high single digits, low double digits on the open market. So as I said in the comments to some of you, I'm not convinced that if I want to bring him back, that I'm going to be able to get a better bargain than the $7 million that I can keep him for today. That said, there's a number of directions this could go. One, I could just be wrong about how he's valued, and we could decline the option today, and he could come back and say, yeah, I'll sign with you for $2.5 million. Two, he could end up going for $10 million a year for 2 or 3 years to somebody before the winter meetings. Or three, he could linger on the market for several months and perhaps be someone that we or another team could get a bargain on in February or March. So there's a lot of different ways that this could go. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But before we officially release him and see what he might be worth free agency-wise, I am a planner, as you know, and although all of the suggestions that you've provided in the last few days as far as the Rule 5 draft, free agency in a few months when people are cheap, the trade market, etc., as opportunities to bring on a left-handed hitting outfielder, and those are all good suggestions, but I wanted to get a bird in hand, so to speak, even if it's not a perfect option of a left-handed bat for the outfield. So we have picked up Oliverio Rangel from the Cincinnati Reds organization. He had a pretty respectable rookie year this year, hit .257 with 20 homers and 451 at-bats. Was a league average offensive player and a 1.3 WAR player. He is not great defensively. He doesn't have much speed, and his bat overall is maybe slightly above average for a major leaguer. He is durable. And when we look at his splits, he does hit better against right-handed pitching than he does against left-handed pitching. So that's one of the things we're looking for. And when we look at his actual batting stats at the major league level, this past year he had a 107 WRC plus against right-handed pitching versus a 65 WRC plus against left-handed pitching. So he is kind of what we're looking for in a left-handed bat that can provide a little bit of supplemental left-handed power to what we have in Bobby Bolig and Mike Heiner. It's conceivable that he doesn't even make our major league roster, though. He's really honestly more of a fourth or fifth outfielder than someone we would want to be playing every day. But he at least gives us a guy that we wouldn't feel embarrassed to put out there in a platoon in a corner outfield spot against right-handed pitching. So what did we have to give up for him? We gave up a lot in quantity. We gave up certainly more than he's worth since, as I said, although he fits a need for us, in a perfect world, he's a fourth or fifth outfielder. With that mediocre defense, he's honestly probably a fifth outfielder / decent left-handed pinch hitter off the bench for a good team, which could very well be the role he ends up with us. Jesus de Santiago, you remember we picked him up in a trade with Toronto after the World Series last year. Spent the whole year in AAA for us. Did hit 286 with 11 homers. A decent potential backup catcher, but given that we have Miller and Funky Cole Medina slotted in as our two catchers next year, and he's already 27 years old, felt that we could move on from De Santiago. He's probably the highlight of the trade, but there's a couple other younger players who are at least marginal prospects. Second baseman Luis Flores, very marginal prospect. Relief pitcher Marquise Corprew has a lot of growth that needs to happen, but is durable, still only 22 years old. Could become something. 20-year-old minor league right fielder Jorge Lara, not really much of a prospect at all at this point. And then a few other prospects around our system. So it wasn't an incredibly high price, not an incredibly great player that we picked up, but it does make me feel a little more comfortable passing the option on Wood, in that I feel like we've got someone who offensively could probably do everything that Wood did for us last year, since he had a pretty bad season in Rangel. I have to decide what I'm going to call him. And he's definitely not as good defensively as Wood, so again, he's not a perfect option. But with the fact that we've got good gloves like Gaglia and Hardage in our outfield, who probably, at least one of whom probably won't be starting every day, feel like we could use Rangel as a bat for 6 or 7 innings and then swap him out defensively if we need to in games, if our manager is astute enough to make those kinds of decisions. So that is the move that I've done to make myself a little more comfortable with potentially moving on from Mr. James Wood. And because of that, we are going to void Mr. Wood's last contract year. And now that opened up some money for us to potentially spend in free agency this year to bring on players, which is nice. And now the $64,000 question: what is Wood looking for now? And you guys were right. He's in the $4 million range. I really thought he might be higher than that. So appreciate the thoughts of you guys. I was wrong about what he might be looking for. Yeah, he's willing to sign 3 years, $4.4 million with us. Interesting. So I'm glad I took the advice. I think most recently the ones who were most vociferous about me being able to get him at a bargain basement price were probably Patrick DeBonis and Jack Hammer Possessor, along with the other guys that I've mentioned who have also opined on him in previous episodes. So thanks for the advice. Now I got to decide whether I'd be interested in potentially bringing him back at a cut rate salary before he hits free agency. He was a well below average offensive player for us this year. And when we look at the splits, he was actually worse against right-handed batters or right-handed pitchers than he was against left-handed pitchers, where he was very effective hitting .308 but only had 26 at-bats. Would think that being a left-handed hitter and having ratings that are a bit better in terms of contact and power against against right-handed pitching, that those splits will normalize next year. I do like his defensive prowess compared to Rangel, but you look at the offensive performance that Wood has put up, and it's been declining a couple years in a row at this point, and he's also 33 years old. So I've got some time to think about it as we get through the arbitration period and award season. Right now I'm kind of inclined to just let him hit free agency, even though I was thinking about keeping him at 7, and I could probably get him for a little more than 4 now. But you've all convinced me that there's many other fish in the sea and many other different methods for us to potentially catch that left-handed hitting corner outfield fish over the next 3, 4, 5 months before the season starts, that I don't necessarily want to put the majority of the money that I do have to spend right now into that Woods basket. And keep in mind, we've got this $7.5 million to spend, but that's only because we've cut our scouting and development budgets already back from where they were a year ago. So if we don't do much this off season, we could certainly pump those back up to the levels that they've been for the last few years, which would help us continue to develop this strong minor league system of ours. And as we've talked about in previous episodes, all 6 of our arbitration-eligible players we have made offers to. The pending free agents, either we don't want back or are looking for more money than we're willing to pay them. So I think at this point it's just a matter of hoping that the arbitration-eligible players signed for what we've offered them. And we'll get into award season and see how many of our Buffalo Wings are honored after a 108-win regular season. And all of our arbitration-eligible players have signed. Yohani Varejo, Lorne Walborn, Juan Veliz, Jorge Carrillo, Andres Medina, and our ace Alexis Barajas. So that is positive. Nothing left to think about as far as arbitration. The fans were excited by some of those signings, so fan interest certainly up over 100 at this point, which hopefully will be good for selling tickets for next season. We've started to fill some of the gaps in our coaching staff. Haven't filled them all, though. Still have some work to do, particularly with a hitting coach down in rookie ball who has been a tough negotiator with us, but hopefully we can get the bench coach and first base coach roles filled now that we've moved back to GM-only mode, and former bench coach Alan Bowles has been promoted to be our manager for the 2036 season. And I have decided to make a somewhat bargain basement offer to Woods before free agent that he's willing to think about before free agency. You remember he was looking for an average of $4.4 million over 3 years, We're offering him an average of only $4 million over 3 years, and there's team options on the second and third seasons, only $3 million for next year. Seems like he's willing to at least think of that and consider it. So we are going to submit that offer to Wood, and perhaps against my better judgment, or more accurately, probably perhaps against the better judgment of many of you who have convinced me of perhaps the folly of continuing to pursue Wood, I am going to make an offer to him. But again, thanks to the input from all of you, if we make this offer, we're only on the hook for him for $3 million next year, as opposed to the $7 million that we would have been if I had exercised that team option for next season. And we've made it now a couple of days into awards season. No Gold Glove winners for Buffalo. No Mariano Rivera Award winner for Buffalo. But the Silver Sluggers have been announced, and we've got an email here directly to us, so that means we've got at least one. I would have to think that at a minimum we're going to have two of them. Shamar Jenneret as DH and Deshaun Seifu as second base or third base. Both seem pretty obvious Gold Glove winners, or Silver Slugger winners to me, but let's see. And Deshaun Seifu does not get a Silver Slugger this year. Jenneret, as we thought, did. Led the league for a second straight year with 138 ribbies. Led the league in OPS, second in home runs, and second in the batting race. So no surprise to see Shamar Jenneret win another Silver Slugger award. But as I said, that I thought that Seifu at second base or third base could definitely win one. Second base went to Joel Nelson, who hit .296 with 26 homers, 124 WRC plus. Third base went to Frank Herrera of the Pirates, who hit .289, 34 homers, and 110 ribbies. So both of those guys had more power than Seifu did. I would still argue, though, that it is a gross oversight for Mr. Seifu to have not won a Silver Slugger here in the 2035 season, when he had perhaps the best year of his outstanding career. Led the National League in addition to at-bats in runs with 125, hits with 208, triples with 13. Also had 44 doubles on the season. Led the league in steals, and he won his first batting title, hitting .312. Maybe the fact that he split time not relatively evenly, but played about 2/3 of his game at third base and a little over a third of them at second base. He definitely got outvoted by guys who hit for more power. But with that 6 WAR that he had for the season and the 122 WRC plus, I still would contend that with the numbers he put up, including a batting title, bit of a surprise that he doesn't get a Silver Slugger award this year. And the big awards have been named. American League Cy Young Award winner unanimously to Chris Lenig of the Mariners. 16-3 record, league best .220 ERA, and he wins a second consecutive AL Cy Young Award. The runner-up was his teammate Jesus Espitilla, who had won the previous 3 Cy Young Awards. So the Mariners have a 1990s Atlanta Braves type rotation, at least at the top, going with Espitilla and now Lenig winning 5 consecutive Cy Young Awards among those two. In the National League, Jeff Dover of the Washington Nationals wins his first Cy Young Award, 15-11 record, led the league with 222 innings pitched, struck out 280 batters, .316 ERA, league best 59 FIP minus, and 8.1 WAR, which was the best among National League pitchers for a second consecutive season. Alexis Barajas, 16-6 with a .285 ERA for us, was the only Buffalo wing who got any votes. In the American League, Max Ziegler of the Las Vegas Athletics was one vote away from being a unanimous MVP. The shortstop led the National League in runs, hits, homers, and ribbies, slugging percentage, OPS, and WRC plus at 170. Not a shock to see a 24-year-old shortstop who puts up those kinds of offensive numbers winning an MVP award. He was the second overall pick in the draft back in 2032. And in the National League, we finally got an MVP here with the Buffalo Wings. It was a very split vote. There were many players who got first place votes, but the most first place votes and the most points overall went to our Shamar Jenneret, who follows up his World Series MVP award in 2034 with a National League MVP award in 2039. So Jenneret now joins Frank Robinson as players who have won Most Valuable Player awards in both leagues. Led the league in ribbies and OPS, as we mentioned this year. Our second best vote getter was last year's MVP runner-up, Deshaun Seifu. He did get 2 first-place votes this year, but he ended up finishing 7th in the voting. Teammate Bobby Bolig, who hit 285, 27 homers of 115 ribbies, finishes 8th in the voting. And that is it. So 3 of the top 8 vote getters for NL MVP are Buffalo Wings, including the winner, Shamar Jenneret. And James Wood did bite on that deal, so he will be back in the mix to be a utility outfielder for us. Like his speed, like his respectable defense, and looking at his ratings against right-handed pitching, at this point we think he's still got 50 contact, 65 power, and a 60 eye. I know that hasn't shown up in his performance on the diamond, which is the most important thing. But for $3 million for next year, definitely saved money compared to whether we had exercised that option. So again, thanks to those of you who pushed me in that direction. And if we have to move on from a $3 million contract because we find a better opportunity through the Rule 5, international free agency, regular free agency, trade market, anywhere else, it's not going to be a contract that cripples us. And we finally made it to the start of free agency. Not going to have tons of money to spend. Fortunately, we're also not going to have tons of holes to fill with this team. Taking a quick look at the international free agents. Starting pitcher Tatashi Oi out of Japan. Looks like a potentially good one. Looking for $12 million-ish a year, so he'll be out of our price range. 27-year-old Daniel Porfil. Don't love the low movement on his pitches and don't love some of the personality traits, but he is durable and he throws pretty hard. Atsushi Masuda out of Japan, reliever looking for about $4.5 million, right-handed reliever. Can't see ourselves chasing him at that price. Arturo Prado, 27-year-old catcher, pretty good defensively, but not much of a bat. Wouldn't mind having a guy like that in our farm system, given his defensive ability. And here is the man, Yoichi Kubota, 27-year-old out of Japan, really good center field range, good bunter, pretty good speed, although not particularly good instincts on the base paths. Looking for over $25 million a year. Certainly looks like he could be a plus bat, right-handed hitting, probably a center fielder or a left fielder. Juan Rojas, 26-year-old out of Cuba, Another right-handed hitting center fielder, pretty decent defensively, a little bit of speed, not quite the same type of bat. And then there's also Keiichiro Yumura. So a couple of interesting guys in the international free agent class, and a lot of familiar names that we expected to see among the American, or more accurately, major league free agents. Spencer Nivens is a guy that we've looked at times over the years trying to trade for, and not surprisingly, the price on him has always been excessive. Hit 264 last year, 25 homers, 105 ribbies for the Marlins. Looking for about $34 million a year, so he'll be out of our price range. A couple of other names that we've looked at in the past: Dylan Carlson, looking for about $21 million a year. Our former guy Jace Barofin, looking for $7 million a year. Certainly a Juan Soto or a Kyle Tucker would love to have one of those left-handed bats, but they're looking at about $18 and $24 million respectively. Marcelo Meyer, looking for almost $15 million a year. C.J. Abrams, who's been on the market almost every season the last few years, looking for about $2 million a year. Our old buddy Samuel Basallo, looking for 1.8. Alec Burleson could be a left-handed bat that might fit for us, looking for about 2.8 million. Given that we've got Wood back at 3 million, feel better about that. Think Wood is a better bat and certainly is a better glove. Taking a look at the top pitchers available, Chris Staten, our former closer over the last couple months of this season, looking for 16 million a year. Cade Smith, another guy who used to close for us briefly several years ago, looking for about 6 million. Former Buffalo wing Garrett Crochet, looking for 1.7 million. Max Meyer, another former Buffalo wing, looking for 11 million as a closer. So we are probably not going to be big players. We've got about $5 million to spend, but as I talked about, would not mind repurposing some of that into scouting and player development, but we've got a little bit of flexibility right now as this 2035 to 2036 offseason really kicks into high gear. As we've talked about, whether or not Generette opts into his contract after next season is going to be critical as to what we can do with this team, because between Deshaun Seifu, Jorge Carrillo, and Juan Veliz, we've got three pretty important players who will be free agents if we don't re-sign them. And with some of the longer-term commitments we've made, a few of the bigger numbers are starting to kick in. Barajas is going to have a final arbitration year with a really big number. So we're already set to be spending $6 million more next year, or $5.2 million more accurately next year, than we're spending this year, which means it's going to be awful hard to bring back Deshaun Seifu. Now, we do have a $10 million team option on Harleen Susanna that we very well could move on from. Almost certainly we'll be moving on from the $4 million team option on James Wood. So there's a way to clear $14 million off the books relatively easily. But that's probably not going to be enough to lock up Seifu if we want. He says he's looking for $26 million a year on average over 8 years at this point. So even though he didn't even win a Silver Slugger this year, he's knows his value, and it's going to be interesting to see whether we can bring him back and whether we want to bring him back next year. And if Generette opts out, makes it easier to bring back Seifu, and it also potentially helps clear up a bit of a log jam that we kind of have starting among right-handed hitters who are kind of DH/first baseman. In addition to Generette, who's been our starting DH ever since we picked him up 2 years ago. Joe Edwards and Arturo Flores both kind of hit that role. And Joe Gallagher, the prospect, also kind of fits that role of a big right-handed bat that lacks a perfect position to play defensively. So going to be an interesting season. We're going to try to win it all. Jenneret coming off of a second MVP in 3 seasons and became the first Buffalo Wings regular season National League MVP this year. Kind of weird that we think our optionality might be best if he opts out of a contract after next season, but regardless of what he does, we're going to want to try to compete for a 9th consecutive playoff berth, and we're going to want to try to compete for a second World Series championship next season, whether it's Jenneret's final season with us or not. So not going to be an incredibly busy off season simply because of the lack of money we have available, but we will still try to get to creative and let you know what we're thinking. And there may be more times when we look for your wisdom, as you have, several of you have given us in recent days in the case of Wood. And I think we ended up in a better spot than we would have thanks to your input. So thanks again for that. And until our next episode, thanks so much for watching and hope you have a great day.